Namo Buddhaya, Namaste. Today I'm coming to you from the charnel ground here. This is where they burn the dead. It's quite warm. I don't think that's because I am actually standing in the basket next to this basket. But a quiet day here today, so we can enjoy the slightly more peaceful atmosphere than the town. I'm near the town for my midday meal, or before midday meal at 11:30, and thought I'd spend this 20 minutes answering some questions from the most appropriate place, the charnel ground. This is where we end up, dead. We get old, we get sick, and we die. So whatever your questions, this is the answer. Impermanence, suffering, not within our powers of control. But let's move to the questions. Eric from Germany, thank you. And let me remind you, I'm no authority or teacher or guru. I'm just sharing with you my experiences as I practice the Buddha's teachings as an ordained Buddhist monk, yes. But I am practicing and learning like you. First question from Eric in Germany. What is your opinion on Abhidharma and Goenka? Oh, I picked the biggest question, but I'm going to summarize it quite quickly. Unlike Abhidharma, which doesn't. There's some of my answer. I don't really have an opinion. In my tradition from the practice I've done, it is about the practice of meditation rather than the studying of it. It is about the doing, not the intellectual aspect of the practice. Sila, Samadhi, Panya. And Panya, wisdom, isn't to be learnt from books. The Abhidharma comes from commentary added later. However, it does reference it in the suttas and from the time of the Buddha as something that the Buddha gladly taught the Devas from 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning to early hours of the morning anyway. Because they had a greater understanding and needed a greater and more in-depth knowledge of the path. Now, I talked the other day with an analogy of the path being from A to B. Let's say we're going from one city to the next. One can just know the way to get there, get on the form of transport and arrive. Or you can know the towns in between, the villages in between, or the little hamlets in between. The Abhidharma, let's say, takes a little hamlet and takes it into a whole life experience of study and research. That's maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but we're analysing each step along the way. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's very useful as an intellectual exercise. It's very interesting as an intellectual exercise. Is it necessary for the practice? Personally speaking, I don't think so. I think it's useful to understand a little bit about it because it's going to crop up in conversation as it is now. And you've also asked about Goenka and its practice. Well, of course, it incorporates into its practice that very subject, the Abhidharma, and all of these different many stages towards the attainment of jhanas. Now, I've gone through the stages towards the attainment of jhanas in a more simplified view, which is the background that I'm coming from. So, in summary, the Abhidharma has its place. A place of intellectual learning, a place of study, a place of expanding the mind's capabilities through that practice of learning, that practice of study. But in terms of meditation, it isn't necessary. One does not need an instruction book. If I want to teach you to learn to swim, if you want to learn to swim, can I give you a book? Can I ask you to learn to swim from a book? No. You have to actually dive in at the deep end, and this is the only way you can learn to swim. This is the same with meditation. You have to do it, practice it, just do it, and it's just that. Okay, next question is from Gnostic Rocker. What do you think about endless bowing? As a Buddhist, how do you relate... so this is the first question. Well, and I apologise, I've condensed the question a little. agnostic rocker. But bowing is in our tradition. We bow to our superior monks, we bow to the Buddha Rupa, that is the physical representation of the Buddha, the statue, if you like. This is something, as monks, we do a lot, yes. I wouldn't quite say it's endless, it can seem that way, excuse me, but where appropriate, I think it's very important. It brings our attention mindfully through a physical action to our humility towards the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. But yes, it does get overdone in some places. It's very much a revered practice here in India. They have a namaskara process, a thing where they are all down and touching your feet. And personally, people bowing to me, I have to admit I find it a little bit uncomfortable. And I have to remind myself continuously, they are not bowing to me. This, let's say, ego, this self, we're actually eliminating. They're just bowing to these robes, what I'm wearing. Like I'm not bowing when I bow to the Buddha Rupa to a lump of metal, stone or wood. No, I'm bowing to the idea of our teacher. In fact, the Buddha more or less forbade the manufacture, production of effigies of himself. And his epitaph, the Tathagata, means thus gone. And he should be represented by such a thing as an empty chair or just two footprints, was his idea. But of course, in reality, we need something to focus upon. It helps with our meditation, it helps with the idea. And this beautiful representation, which comes from Greek mythology and the Greek idea of what is aesthetically pleasing, became popular and was represented through Afghanistan, those beautiful carvings in the mountainsides before they were blown up, and has become today what we represent, or what we come to see as the representation of our teacher, the Buddha, whom I'm sure didn't really look much like that. Bowing, yes, it's important, and it's reminding us of our humility. It isn't overly necessarily a part of the practice, however. It does become so perhaps in some traditions and in some areas of the world, some parts of the planet. However, you can take it or leave it, like all of these parts. So don't let it put you off. It's a little more subtle, let's say, these days in the West than it is perhaps in India and maybe even in China. I mean, maybe even in Thailand. I don't know about China. I've not been there to practice. So bowing. And also you've asked, how does a Buddhist you relate to local Hindus, Muslims and Buddhists in your area? Actually, my area where I am, there really are very few Buddhists other than the foreigners visiting, where I meet quite a few. And they are from Europe, even England, and Buddhist-wise mainly Europe. And I relate to them as I do ordinarily, and in fact everybody from every religion. Here I'm standing in a Hindu charnel ground. Many people walking around, no one saying, hey monk, leave. I'm going for my food now down to a Hindu, not temple, but a place where they offer prasad from the temple to be fed. So I'd say I get on very well, and I'm very well looked after by the Hindus. Not here because there aren't any or very many Muslims, but in Tumkur, where I was previously, there were many Muslims, and they looked after me very well in their chai shops, in their various places of worship even. They would bring me chai, bring me cold drinks, whatever I was needed, whatever time of day it happened to be. So I'm ecumenical, I respect all religions, but I'm not just saying that, I am genuinely interested in religion as a whole. Holistically, religion was my interest before I found Buddhism, and I found Buddhism through that interest. So I stumbled across and was, of course, originally a Christian, as you may already know, and brought up by Catholic monks, and that monastic austerity was what sparked my interest in monasticism, from a critical point of view, first of all, which ultimately resulted in me finding Buddhism a different approach entirely, an atheistic approach, with nothing to believe in and nothing to believe, yet this way of living this simple life, which I do believe in as being the only, not the only path to Nibbana, but the easiest path to nirvana without the distractions of worldly life. So I hopefully answered that question. Thank you, Gnostic Rocker, for that. And Rajiv, India, what difference do you find between Thai forest and Sri Lankan monk life? Okay, I've never been to Sri Lanka, so I don't know. Theravada Buddhism, let's say it can be divided into two areas. There are meditative monks and... No, let's say it differently. In Thailand, Theravada Buddhism, there are city monks and forest monks, or village monks, forest monks. The forest tradition was more rejuvenated in the by Ajahn Mun in the sort of late 30s, 40s, 50s, but it was always there, just a little bit unheard of. But we come to know really Buddhism in Thailand as these beautiful gold temples of Bangkok and Chiang Mai, and the orange robes, the bright coloured robes, and the many monks milling around the hugely populated monasteries. And that is the same in other parts of the world also. But that isn't really the idea of a monastery, a forest monastery. The questioner refers to Thai forest. Well, the Thai forest tradition is that. Thailand has a forest tradition where a monk lives in the forest, under a tree, in the open air, or in a cave. Or you can live in a small monastery with some other monks, or get together with monks on the Uposators. Whereas the city or village monastery is like my monastery in Bangalore. It's perhaps more an educational establishment, a group, a community place where people go to learn, go to give, offer dana to the monastic community, which then can be spread to monks further afield or local social groups. So even in one country, there are so many varieties of practice for a monk. So I wouldn't say there's a difference between specifically Thai forest and Sri Lankan practice, because you could practice as a Thai forest monk in any country. I've practiced as a Thai forest monk in England when I go there, yet, going back to the previous question, I visit a Church of England church in the village where my mother lives, where I used to go, basically to touch base with my Kalyana Mita of a different faith, my noble friends of a different faith. I don't go there to worship, I go there to be friendly, be kind, be nice, to enjoy their company, as with the Muslims and the Hindus here. So the practice is inside, it's not outside. You can practice as a Theravada Buddhist monk of the Thai Forest Ajahn Chah tradition, even if you're living in a busy Shanghai city monastery, even if you're staying just outside of a Hindu temple. Anywhere, it's inside you. So I don't think we should be distracted by our external conditions. I'm kind of running out of time, and I don't want to rush the next couple of questions, but they're quite quick questions, so I will. Tejas from India, are the 10 immoral actions, that's the 10 akusala karma, so bad karma, yes, different from 5 precepts? Yes, and one should not be too distracted by this. It comes up in some Google searches. It is a study of karma. It's a deeper level of the study of the 12 steps of dependent origination, which I will go into, which needs to be looked at, because that is the basis of karma. But the Buddha himself said, never try to understand karma. It's beyond our understanding. We will get payback. We will have the results of the consequences of our actions. Karma just means action. So these 10 bad actions will only result in bad karma. It's simpler enough to understand through the Four Noble Truths, or the Noble Eightfold Path, let's say, the Noble Eightfold Path, that from the Sila categories of the Noble Eightfold Path of right intention, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, those 4 will cover all of those 10 akusala karma, those 10 immoral actions. They're covered in our beautiful Noble Eightfold Path. So you don't need to study something separately outside of what the Buddha taught. It's there in the Buddha's teachings. It's just that. And as far as the 5 precepts are concerned, they are just that, the 5 precepts. Don't kill, steal, sexual misconduct, lie, or take intoxicants. Do not do those 5 things that simply. If you want to expand on those 5 things, you take it then to the Noble Eightfold Path. So right speech can be applied to the 4th of not lying and expanded upon. But essentially the 4th is not lying. Right speech in the Noble Eightfold Path is a whole nother topic, inclusive of not lying. So don't complicate it further, is my answer. Tejas from India. Thank you for your question. And finally, Bhavani through India. Please don't think you're getting a short answer because of the time running out. I would find that very difficult to do anyway, as you're probably noticing. Once I start, I can't stop speaking. What is meant by neutral feelings? Okay, and how do they affect the mind? And is it important to know neutral feelings? Okay, neutral feelings are: if you like something, it's the feeling. If you like something, you like something. If you don't like something, you don't like something. If you neither like something or like something, you neither like something or like something. And that is a neutral feeling. It's not necessarily somewhere in the middle. It is of no feeling at all. Does this affect the mind? Of course. Likewise, a feeling of desire and a feeling of aversion, a feeling of sensual desire, a feeling of ill will, both affect the mind. No feeling will affect the mind. It will affect the mind towards equanimity, towards reactionless. It'll place you in a position of not knowing whether to run to or run from something. But however, beware. Neutral feelings are not a place to develop confusion. Should I go this way? Should I go that way? That is a development of delusion. They should be, yes, considered important because they do affect the mind. Neutral feelings pull the mind away, perhaps from running towards or running from, into the center, but can confuse you. So they are to be known. So if you are observing the breath through anapanasati in your meditation, and you are enjoying the breath, you know you are enjoying the breath. If you are not enjoying the breath, you know you are not enjoying the breath. If you are neither enjoying the breath nor not enjoying the breath, you know you have these neutral feelings about the breath. But one must also know from the observational point of view that your knowing is that. It is witnessing an absence of feeling. And an absence of feeling is like an absence of sound. I wish there was an absence of this sound. I'll tell you what it is in a minute. And you'll notice this absence of sound more in its absence than when it's there. You'll notice the space in the room between the objects, the silence between the sounds, and when you don't have the pain, you'll not notice the lack of pain. Like you can easily miss these neutral feelings. We need to try and bring our mindfulness, our sati, our attention, our conscious awareness to these neutral feelings, like the space, the silence between the sounds, the space in the room between the objects, and even like the silence between the words that I'm speaking. By drawing our attention thus towards neutral feelings, we are more strengthening our powers of concentration towards samadhi. So I hope that answers your questions, and I hope that answers your question, Bhavina from India. I put it away, so I had to remember your name, Bhavina from India. I hope that answers your question, or I hope, let's say, I understood your question correctly. This is more the thing, because obviously my understanding of the question is what is going to make the answer. Like our understanding of our environment and our conditions is what makes us behave in the way we behave. Another example of Dharma in action. I must go now to Prasad for my food. If you wanted to know what the noise was, they have an electric or some powered saw now, brr, 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 in the timber mill just next door, and this timber mill provides a lot of the wood for burning us when we die, because they put some nice stacked up wood underneath, and then the body goes on the top, and away we go. So this is good karma that they're making this wood for this very important part of our lives. Have you chopped your firewood for your cremation? Probably not. But metaphorically speaking, be chopping your firewood in your mind for your cremation. Because for one sure thing is, you're going to get old, you're going to get sick, and you're going to die. We're all going to die. So you don't need to really literally be chopping the wood, but in your mind, through this practice, we are preparing the funeral pyre. On that cheery note, I'm off for my meal. Namo Buddhaya.